Okay, welcome to part 3 of my review for pre-calculus, the trigonometric unit. I am in the calculator section, so you want to make sure that you have your TI-83 or 84 calculators to help you along with this. If you do not, then you can use Desmos, as I am going to be using for this to kind of help you along. I will be explaining to you how to find these types of problem or how to figure out these values on your calculator. You need to make sure that your calculator is set in a couple ways. But, from here on out, let's get started. So it says Sarah is riding a Ferris wheel. Her sister Carrie starts the stopwatch and records some data. Let H represent Sarah's height. Um, and so the thing that I want to do here is I want to pull out some information. So I want to pull out 7 seconds and 3 seconds, right? And as I underlined them in the wrong order. So this is going to be 3 seconds and 7 seconds. At 7 seconds, she is at the lowest point at 20 feet. So I'm going to make a point at 7 seconds and it being at 20 feet. By the way, time is usually the x-axis, while some type of height or distance away is going to be our y value. Now, the other highest point, it looks like it's going to be at 80. So 80 will go up here. I'll mark that at 3 seconds. And since when we're talking about a Ferris wheel, right, the height goes up and down as time goes on. And what ends up happening is you end up getting some sort of sinusoidal curve. So we should get a curve that kind of looks like this. Okay, and to tell you the truth, that is all the information we technically need. So we're going to write down the last couple things like we did before. So max is 80, minimum is going to be 20, and then my period is kind of hard to kind of get. If I'm going from this highest point to this lowest point, right, I need to figure out when it goes back up to its highest point. Now, you could do some math to help you figure that out, just kind of figuring out the distances, but I'm going to do a little bit of the same. If I think about this distance from the highest point to the lowest point, that is in a sense half a period. And if I know that distance in this case is going to be 4, if a half a period is 4, then a full period is 8. Okay, so once I have my max, my min, my period, great, I can start out my equation. So A is going to be equal to, in this case it's going to be 80 minus 20 divided by 2. So that'll give us 30. My B value is going to be 2 pi over the period. And in this case, it's going to be 2 pi over 8, which is going to be pi over 4. Okay, my C value, now this is a distance away from the y-axis. So how many units did I go over? So in this case, I went over 3. If I'm using my highest point as my starting point. And then my D value is going to be the minimum, which is 20, plus the A value, which is 30, and that gives me 50. And just kind of double check, does it seem like 50 is the middle ground, right? Is it 30 units away here and 30 units away here? And in this case, it does. So I'm going to write down my trigonometric equation. You most likely want to use cosine. So my A value is going to be 30 cosine of parentheses. My B value, so I'll start off with that, pi over 4 parentheses. So we do 2 sets of parentheses. X minus 3 for my C value, and then plus 50. Now, I didn't do things in terms of H and T, but that is okay. I'm not going to dock you points because you wrote the wrong variables. But yes, H is supposed to be the Y value, and T is supposed to be the X value. Now, when you plug this into your calculator, you're going to plug this into the y equals section. You're also going to make sure that your calculator is in degrees, because if it is not, then you're going to kind of get some screwed up values. Now, you want to also make sure that you set your window to match sort of what the window is in the picture that you draw, right? So we want to make sure that the y value is going to be up to, let's say, 100. While the seconds, maybe we can kind of double it, and so maybe that we'll want to go to in, like, let's say, up to 20. So there's my window. Okay, so write down my equation. Y equals 30 cosine, okay, parentheses. So I'm going to write pi divided by 4, open parentheses, x minus 3. Okay, close my parentheses twice, and then plus 50. And you need to make sure that you do that on your calculator. Set up the parentheses exactly the same way. Okay, so we end up getting a graph that looks like this, and to tell you the truth, it sort of does model what I have in my picture. Okay, so it says, when will the height of Sarah be above the ground level at 11.5 seconds? Now, when you're working with your TI-83 or 84 calculator, you're going to go to the following. You're going to hit second trace, which is calculate. Then you're going to go to value, hit enter, and then type in t, well, not t, but in this case it's going to be x. Type in 11.5 and hit enter. Since I have to do things a little bit differently, I'm going to say x is going to be equal to 11.5, figuring out my intersection, and so that is going to be 77.716 feet. Okay, the next one says determining the first two times t is going to be greater than 0 when the height of Sarah reaches above the ground, or the height is 70 feet. So in your equations, right, you should have the first equation. The next one you're going to do is you're going to do y equals 70. And then figuring out those intersections. Now to figure out the intersections, we're going to do the following. We're going to go to second trace, which is calculate. We're going to scroll down to intersection, and then you're going to move really close to one of those 2 points and then hit enter to kind of help you kind of single in on those 2 intersections, and you should get the following. You should get 1.929 seconds and 4.071 seconds when you do those intersections. And you should be rounding about 3 decimal places. Okay, next thing, list the period for the trigonometric function. So sine, cosine, secant, cosecant, all of these are going to have a period which is going to be 2 pi. While tangent and cotangent, these are going to have a period that is going to be pi. Those are the only 2 that are different. Okay, number 11. So in this case, we are trying to figure out, in a sense, the b value. If the c value kind of annoys you, just change it to be b. So it is going to be how to figure out the b value. Well, the b value is 2 pi over the period, which is going to be 2 pi over 2 pi, which is just going to give us 1. Over here, b is going to be equal to 2 pi over 10, and that's just going to be pi over 5. And then the last one, b is going to be equal to 2 pi over pi divided by 4. Now this looks very weird, so I'm going to rewrite it a different way. So I'm going to say 2 pi multiplied by the reciprocal of that, right? Because instead of dividing by something, you can always multiply by the reciprocal. So that would be 4 over pi. Cross off the pi's, and so we get 8. So the b value in that case is 8. All right, last one. So sine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark down 1 and -1 right at this tick mark and this tick mark. At this tick mark, I'm going to write this as pi over 2, and this is going to be pi. So when we're dealing with sine, and then this is going to be negative pi over 2. So when we're dealing with sine, we're going to start at negative pi over 2. We're going to say -1, 0, 0, and then 1 pi over 2. And then we get kind of like a curve that looks like this. For cosine, same deal. I'm going to set up the same way, -1, 1, but instead of doing negative pi over 2, I'm going to do pi over 2 and then pi. So I'm going to go from 1, 0 pi over 2, and then -1 pi. So we end up getting the curve that looks like this. And then lastly, tangent. So at pi over 2 and negative pi over 2, that means that we're going to have some type of horizontal asymptote. And we have the point 0, 0. We have the point 1 and -1 at pi over 4. So we have that point, and we also have the negative version of that at negative pi over 4. And so we end up getting a graph that looks like this. All right, and then let's write down our domain. So the domain for the inverse sine is going to go from -1 to 1. Our range is going to go from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. Now notice I am doing brackets. That means that I am including both the negative pi over 2 to pi over 2 and the -1 to 1. And you'll see how things are different when I get to tangent. So domain goes from -1 to 1 again. Remember, that's our x value, and range goes from 0 to pi. Okay, and then the last one, our domain for this one is actually going to be all real numbers, while our range in this case is going to go from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. Now you'll notice that these are with parentheses, and since I have those horizontal asymptotes, that means that the graph is going to get infinitely close to those but never actually touch. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I am officially finished with the whole review guide. If you have any specific types of questions, please feel free to comment down below or comment on my Discord. And I hope you found these videos to be helpful. I'm going to do the whole YouTube thing. Please like the video if you thought that it was useful, so that I can possibly be making more of these videos as time goes on. And thanks for watching.